Did you know that British soaps are brainwashing you? Well, probably not you if you're watching this podcast, because you can't be bothered to tune into terrestrial television, and very smart of you. The adverts are nauseating. They don't look like the world on your doorstep, let's put it that way. And also, these kinds of things are written pretty poorly, but they might be indoctrinating your grandmother, your mother, your aunt. I know my mum watches at least 3 out of 4 of the soaps we're going to mention here every night and makes a little ritual of it. Hi Mum, you're right there. However, it's quite interesting if you don't watch these things. I watch them in passing as I go into the kitchen for occasion when I stay there. It's funny how you might not notice that they're using this as a Trojan horse for ideological narratives. They're really pushing the current thing through what should be prime time entertainment. So I thought we'd go through some of the clips and look at what we might be missing as comedians yourself, political commentators myself, perennially on the internet and in alternative spheres, that the mainstream people who aren't always tuning into the podcast may be being exposed to, very much to their own detriment. I'd like to point out first that even though I had this segment in mind for a little while, Paul Joseph Watson, friend of the show from Cole, did make a video on this fairly recently. We're not going to play any of it, but of course credit to Paul. But I've got a few more clips that we're going to have to be subjected to, and stories that he didn't cover in there, and so it makes it incredibly valuable little segment, I suppose. So first, over to the Yorkshire
Can I
Dales.
just say, they've always been propaganda, haven't they?
I
mean, wasn't the Archers
so.
originally there to disseminate information to farmers? Wasn't that the original purpose of the...
Yeah, sure.
Which is
I
inherently
don't know
propagandistic.
specifically about that, but we're talking about, I suppose, the message specifically that they're putting forward in the current year, which is racially segregating activism and calling everyone a conspiracy theorist which questions government narratives.
Okay.
Yes. So I'm going to show you some clips that you might be utterly blinded by. So I thought I'd subject you to this for a bit of fun. So firstly, we're going to something that is quite innocuous. Emmerdale's actor James Moore, and why he's proud to be disabled and on screen. He recently won a National Television Award, and he said that his disability doesn't stop him from being an actor. He said, despite disabilities featuring much more heavily on our screens, there is still a long way to go. And so, even though well done to this fella for doing very well and overcoming his disability and becoming a very successful actor, you can see how the presupposition is we have to do more for X group. Rather than telling an authentic story, we have to have characters now centered around which box they tick. And he might be a perfectly nice fella, but I know, for example, EastEnders has done something around the same time with a deaf character. You're seeing increasingly storylines are written around who we should represent and what we should be telling you, how we should be reaching through the screen and shaking our viewers with the message, rather than, is this a compelling story? I know saying compelling story for soaps when it's either a death or a pregnancy endlessly is always, or an extramarital affair, is maybe a bit of a fallacy to appeal to, but it's definitely outside the norm of, I don't know, Barbara Windsor smacking Pat Butcher around the face and throwing her earrings off. It's less get out of my pub and more, get on board with my particular politics. So Emmerdale has, after 2020, introduced a black family as part of its BLM drive, because its black characters are now just political pawns, it seems. Emmerdale is bringing a new black family to, quote, the heart of the village, the soap announced tonight when writing this article 2 years ago. ITV explains that...
It's set in Cumbria, Emmerdale, isn't it?
I think it's the Yorkshire Dales.
Okay.
Yes.
Of course it would be, yeah.
Yes. ITV explained that its changes were brought in by the broadcaster in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement last summer and all of the peaceful protests that brought. ITV's continuing drama boss John Winston said the Black Lives Matter movement rightly gave us an impetus to many great initiatives on screen and off-screen for us. Off-screen meaning activism. For us, a key part of that is increasing the number of BAME writers and directors, because for some reason anyone who isn't white is just part of a big ethnic bloc, and you're all the same, according to these producers, which I don't think so, obviously. The writers and directors we employ, as they are key to the creative powerhouse behind the shows. ITV has been running a campaign called Black Voices, capital B Black, by the way, airing short films where people talk about the experiences of racism and talk about their hopes to the future. Have you noticed this increasing capital B Black in articles and things like that?
I haven't, but I'm noticing it now.
Yeah, so what it is actually an effort by the critical race theorists who want to posit black people within quote-unquote white societies, that's England, America, Europe, as a nation within a nation, as a homogenous group, no matter whether you're Ghanaian and Nigerian or from the West Indies or Haiti. It means that you're somehow all bound together because you have melanin and because you don't look like what they believe is the dominant group in society that's totally unaccepting.
It annoys me because, like, people would say my wife who I'm no longer with, but they would say she was black.
Right.
But she wasn't. She was mixed race. People say Obama was black.
Yes.
And to me, he wasn't. He was mixed race. And, you know, he was half white, half black. And as was so my kids, my eldest two kids, are a quarter.
Yeah.
So they're technically mixed race. And I just think to describe anyone who's got any black in them as black.
Yeah. Is as racist as the one
No,
drop
I mean,
rule that the
Obama was
Democrats
as white
used.
as he was black.
Yes, yeah, but it's also they're capitalising off of that inaccurate classification
It's
to
all this
raise
identity,
resentment and involuntarily politicise your identity.
I'd
And
like to have a conversation with a black person about that because I'd be interested to know what I've got wrong, what I've got right. Or
Zuby was in yesterday, and he and Carl was going through his tweets as he went around travelling
Carl's
the world.
mixed race.
Yeah, technically, yeah. And Zuby just said, well, I don't feel represented by a woman by the colour of her skin. Instead, I feel represented more by the people I associate within this office because we share politics, we share a worldview, we share interests like going to the gym and improving ourselves. But I don't feel represented by, for example, Patrice Cullors, who's the open Marxist who runs Black Lives Matter, who steals money from grieving families. I don't feel represented by someone who's evil just because we share a skin colour. But unfortunately, people that write shows like Emmerdale think that that's the same thing, and that's utterly cruel. It's also hilarious because one of the sons that's been introduced in this black family in Emmerdale is gay man, and it would be very interesting to ask the heavily Christian Nigerian immigrants as to what they think of homosexuality, because I don't think you'll get a homogenous opinion.
Listen to some Caribbean music, what they've got to say about homosexuality as well.
Yes, it's not remarkably tolerant. Speaking of terrible race politics and homogeneity, let's go on to Hollyoaks briefly. It's Hollyoaks, but now with an all-black cast. Yeah, so Channel 4 will air the UK's first continuing drama to be made with an all-black cast and written and directed by black talent as part of the broadcaster's capital B Black to Front diversity initiative. Shooting is underway on the hour-long special episode of Hollyoaks, starring, written and directed by black British
What's
talent.
Hollyoaks about?
Hollyoaks is one of the younger soaps, so it's less about families, it's more about young people. I don't know exactly where it's set, actually.
I thought wasn't it set in Liverpool?
I don't think it's set in Liverpool, but I could be wrong. It's the only one that my mum doesn't watch, and so I'm not as familiar with it. Actually, my uncle used to watch it.
I'm pretty ignorant about soaps.
I don't blame you. Yeah, most terrestrial TV is unwatchable at the moment.
Just go up a little bit. I want to see the name of that actor on the left.
It's Richard Blackwood.
Oh, of course it is.
Yes,
I knew
yeah.
I recognised.
I watched a pantomime with him in Catford actually years ago, which is quite funny seeing him there. The soap launched an investigation last year after a number of black
He
cast
could have been
members.
massive, Richard Blackwood. He was on when he was doing his MTV show. There was a real kind of freshness about him, and he was like
That's
looked
what
like
someone else said.
He was really going to be a big star, and I don't know.
Instead, now his career has been co-opted into a political movement to berate
I guess
viewers
he
with
just wants
white
to work.
guilt.
Yeah.
So apparently, the reason they did this is because they had a racism allegation on set. So last year, Hollyoaks launched an investigation after the black actor Rachel Adedeji, I hope I got that right, tweeted several claims about her experiences of racism on the set. Adedeji claimed that a senior producer referred to black cast members using a racial slur, doesn't list what that one is, so obviously that's just an allegation, and that black female actors were, quote, forced to drastically change their hair because otherwise viewers would not be able to tell them apart. If that was said, obviously that's ridiculously racist, but that then doesn't mean that you make an all-black episode, which buys into the idea that, oh yeah, blacks are all the same, so we might as well just have them represented by one big group. You don't end racism with more racism. But it's interesting, actually, because this has been spurred on by Channel 4 working with the Sir Lenny Henry Centre for Media Diversity on the Black to Front initiative. And Sir Lenny Henry, of course, has been recently in headlines for helping to ruin the rings of power by saying that it's our time now about being black.
Lenny
and
Henry.
Tolkien.
The entertainment industry has been so kind to Lenny Henry.
Yes.
And he just never stops moaning.
No, he never stops moaning about apparently Glastonbury's too white.
Just practice some gratitude.
Yes, that is actually the perfect takeaway from this. Please practice some gratitude. So, let's go on to Eastenders, because of course they're doing something similar. Eastenders unveils timely mural of black woman, a giant judgmental mural of a black woman opposite the Queen Vic, staring at it, because apparently the Queen Vic pub is an icon of white supremacy. Eastenders viewers will spot a new face when the BBC soap returns, and this was in 2020, painted on a wall opposite the Queen Vic pub. The mural of a black woman, just a random black woman, not even necessarily a person that's specific to EastEnders, was painted by Nottingham-born, not an EastEnder, visual artist Dreff, and measuring 5 metres by 2 metres in size. It will be a permanent backdrop to storylines. Dreff, real name Nikaye Dzane, I hope I got that right, called having his work become a fixture on the show a really exciting opportunity. I'm so pleased that EastEnders has found a way to reflect modern-day UK in a time when so many of us are finding ways to voice anti-racism. Anti-racism is something that the cast, crew, and producers care passionately about at EastEnders. Are you familiar with this term anti-racism? Like what it actually means?
No.
Okay, so for those who have come across this term in daily life but aren't sure, anti-racism was actually invented by Ibrahim X. Kendi. He's an academic who wrote the book How to Be an Anti-Racist, and he also wrote a government white paper to give as a policy to the Democrats, which said we should appoint a citizens' assembly of black-only academics, of course including himself, that should oversee every policy the US government puts out, and if it doesn't result in equity between racial groups, so that's, for those who don't know, equal outcomes between groups, even though, as we've already said, different ethnic groups, different histories, different people and the diverse opinions make up those ethnic groups, so you're not going to get the same outcome across them. Unless those policies produce the same outcomes for white and black, we can't have the policy. So you can't elect this group, and he's giving himself a job. So it's literally a dictatorship of the proletariat by race to ensure equal material outcomes. So it's race-based communism, smuggled in with a euphemistic phrase, which of course we would all agree with being anti-racist, because I don't think much about skin colour in my daily life, and I'm not going to discriminate against a person on those grounds. But apparently, you do with this. And his exact quote was actually, we need present discrimination to remedy past discrimination. So he thinks discriminate against white people in the present because some white people discriminate against some black people in the past. So it's just an openly racist doctrine. But they're saying EastEnders has always stood for this. Astounding. They've also introduced their first drag character. Look at this stunning and bravery, shall we? If we scroll down to the image, please, John. Lovely. 1st of July this year. Yes, very convincing. EastEnders' first ever drag queen is due to sashay to Albert Square as a regular character. Fans have been given a sneak peek at Tora Mizu, played by Matthew Morrison. Again, look at the toleration of LGBT among the black community, shall we? Matthew said it was a privilege to showcase the creative art of drag to viewers and the residents of Watford, and to represent the LGBTQIA+ community. It's important for people to feel reflected on screen. Now, for some reason, drag queens are everywhere at the moment, and they keep mixing up the pronouns. It's almost like they're equating them with trans, which is weird because it's almost calling gender a costume, again, which I'm sure women would have objected to in the same way that black people would object to white people wearing shoe polish in a minstrel show. Yeah, strange. Lucas Young, a drag queen by the name of Miss Classburgers, which seems to be making fun of autistic people, thanks for that, who uses the pronouns she, they, which is weird because it's literally a costume, says it's significant for a show as big as EastEnders to be, quote, unapologetically dealing with these issues. It could have a big impact, Lucas feels, as growing up they didn't see much representation on TV. Quote, if I had that realisation or opportunity from a younger age,
Drag queens?
Yeah.
I thought they're quite... Well, people are always in drag on TV.
There's a difference between the sort of pantomime dame approach and the drag queens, which, and I covered this in a video for the website called The Killer Clowns of Leftism, the approach written by a drag queen and academic called Little Miss Hot Mess, that says that drag is a pedagogic tool for bringing queer ways of knowing into the imaginations of children, and, quote, we will leave a trail of glitter that will never come out of the carpet. So it's a way of ideologically activizing young people into the LGBT movement, not just being gay, not being freedom of expression, but using your sexuality to wage a revolution against the straight white male hegemony. Again, they're raising consciousness in a group of people they define as black and saying, aren't you different from the whites, you should wage war. Now they're using the same thing for gay people, drag queens, etc. It's all about politics, it's not about identity. So he said, the only way we can normalise drag and the queer community is to talk about it and make people aware of the people we are. And he said, I feel like I would have been able to begin creating more if I would have seen myself. Knowledge is power. And there is the mask off moment. It's not about representation or honesty, it's about power. As I said, political influence. So they're not creating this character to be authentic, they're creating this to reach through the screen and slap you and say, we are now in control, you should accept it. It's very dark stuff. There's a promo for this. If we should watch the promo.
Thanks, sweetheart.
Uncle Mitch, sort of anti-carrot.
Sorry, what?
You're gonna kill yourself!
I'm prepared to die for my ride.
Did someone call for a drag queen? Salter. Down. Oh, Natalie.
So notice there for our viewers, it says Walford fit for a queen. It's got the racial pride flag in there. And for those who don't know, the newly adopted racial pride flag has the traditional conservative pride flag of the rainbow intersected by a triangle from the left, which has the trans flag of white, pink and blue, and then a black and brown stripe. Do you know what that black and brown stripe stands for?
No.
Black and brown people. So they're literally segregating people by race and sexuality in their own flag. Again, it's not about equality, it's not about acceptance. It's about creating grievance groups in society and agitating them and then putting them on screen to increase their level of power relative to their proportion of the population. And they're using this to speak to normal working people who clock off work at 5 o'clock and watch this over dinner to say, this is the reality now, accept it. It's very dark stuff.
How many people watch Eastenders these days?
I don't actually know the viewing figures. I'm not sure. But I would assume that the viewing demographic of younger people is not particularly large because most young people don't watch terrestrial television. Increasingly few people are switching off their license fee. Increasingly more people are switching off the license fee. Increasingly few people are tuning into things like the BBC. So I think this is targeted at an old demographic.
Yeah. My kids, I've got 4, and they watch telly all the time. The youngest only ever watches sport. The next one... Actually, she hardly watches any. She just listens to, watches classical music on YouTube, and then. But the eldest girl, who is 20, watches TV all the time. But pay-per-view, not pay-per. What do you call it? On demand.
Netflix, things like that.
Netflix, but she will watch a lot of stuff on iPlayer. She will watch a lot of series on iPlayer, and the eldest one watches quite a bit as well, but. They'll never watch it in real time, and I don't believe they've ever watched. They probably don't even know what EastEnders is. They'll watch like a funny sitcom or something.
Yeah, but it's attempts to obviously they're more aware and in touch with
Peaky Blinders or something they'd watch.
They have more of the politics accessible at their fingertips, but this is more targeted at Gen X, boomers, octogenarians who are on social media significantly less in touch with platforms like ours, who don't parrot the mainstream narrative, and instead they get their political worldview through narratives. And the critical race theorists knew the power of narrative. Charles R. Lawrence III wrote a thing called The Word and the River, and he said, literally, quote, we must flood the airways with our narratives to try and alter your perception of reality, to believe that the marginal identities like LGBT or racial minorities are suddenly the dominant identities, and that's why they should have more political power, specifically over you.
None of this would be possible if the state did not if we separated money and state, because there would not be the money to pay for it all.
Nope, and you wouldn't have the broadcasters.
It would be cut off at the tax. In the same way that that PayPal has cut off the Free Speech Union, we should cut off the state by using non-state money.
Defund the BBC. Lovely.
Now, just on the subject of the BBC, one of the things that goes on, there's this whole thing of, I think it was the Halifax on Twitter started using its pronouns, and then somebody complained, and the guy on Twitter just said, if you don't like it, don't bank with it. And it had spent years trying to build up its customer base. And, there is this attitude that the customer is always right, and you should do what you can to please your customer. Obviously, the customer can be an a-hole sometimes. But I think what happens with the BBC is it's got this huge captive market in the age range of 45 up to 100 or whatever it is. It's probably half the population. I don't know that, I'm making it up, but let's say it's something like that. Everyone over the age of 45, and particularly everyone over the age of 60. It's just got, particularly Radio 4, it's just got this huge captive market. And I feel that with a lot of the decisions, the BBC, they're always going, we need to get more young people on board. Well, young people don't listen to Radio 4. They don't watch the BBC except maybe on iPlayer or Match of the Day or whatever it is. They don't watch TV in real time. And I feel like because the customer of the TV tax, the license fee, is taken and it's not voluntarily given, and then it's handed to the BBC, the customer, which is the viewer, loses power in that dynamic. It's a bit like the NHS. The doctor is not directly accountable to the patient when the patient should have the power of the customer, and he doesn't. And so, the NHS is totally weighed in favour of the supplier rather than the customer. And a much more natural market dynamic is, the customer seller, if you like. And the BBC has just lost touch with its customers.
As well, they're journalistic charity enterprises arm, which isn't funded by a state licensed
and
license fee is predominantly given by organisations like the Gates Foundation as
Well,
well.
that too,
So there
and
are ideological interests at work.
I'll
even there.
say, and it's full of producers that think they know better.
Yeah.
And it's thick. And for many of its producers, the customer of the BBC is a problem that needs to be brushed away, and it gets in the way of the smooth running of the organisation.
once
And they're
told-
just this frothy people from Tunbridge Wells who
Yeah.
don't know any better.
I was once told by a producer on a network I will not name that slow down, don't use as many big words because our audience is stupid. Direct quote. So they do regard you with utter contempt. They see you as someone to be ideologically propagandized to. So if we look next at The Sun, I remember watching this clip live and was utterly dismayed. There was a encounter between this nurse here, Ash, and this woman in the wheelchair, and the exact dialogue was she offered her treatment for a shortness of breath, and the woman said, "I want someone from here," and the nurse said, "I am from here," and the old woman said, "No, I mean really from here." And she said, "Oh, you don't think I'm from here?" And the old woman went, "Oh, I just want someone else." And it's meant to be, and she had a really bad day in the episode, it's meant to be, oh, the pervasive racism that's everywhere, it's attacking our glorious NHS. Don't you feel sorry for the doctors? And it's like, okay, obviously this character is a representative person. She's an actual racist. But the number of encounters that happen like this in everyday life are so astronomically low. And if we look at somewhere like Leicester at the moment, for example, it's more likely that you're going to have inter-ethnic conflict of a religious notion between the Hindus and the Muslims than you are a racist old white lady saying, "Oh, don't save my life because you're brown." Utterly ridiculous.
It was quite funny listening to this monologue by some guy in the Leicester riots, Muslim guy, and he was ranting on, and he had a balaclava over his face so that you could only see his eyes.
Yeah.
And he was going, "I've got it in for the Hindus, but the Hindus who are from England, they're okay, but it's the Hindus who are coming over here and doing all of that." And it was like,
Yeah.
look at yourself, look at the irony, man.
Yeah, exactly. If we go to the next one as well, Eastenders are pushing critical race theory books. They're literally saying that the white guy, they played it off as a bit cheesy, but the white guy, in trying to understand his interracial relationship, bought the book Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race.
In EastEnders?
In EastEnders, that's a shot from the, literally.
Oh, that's a bit of product placement, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's also a critical race theory book which says that black and white people can't talk to each other. And as I said to you, they're trying to raise resentment without the abilities for us to talk between groups. And so what's the only way of resolving conflict? Then it's violence. They just think they're going to win. So then they have a Muslim convert storyline, and this is from Bobby Beale, who a few years ago, about 5 years ago now, the storyline was he killed his sister, gone to prison. He comes out of prison, and now he's reformed because he's converted to Islam. And there's an article here. He's now dating a girl, by the way, whose dad and brother are rampant Islamophobes. So the storyline is, obviously there's a Romeo and Juliet style intolerance against Islam, even though he's a convicted killer. There are an estimated 80,000 converts to Islam in Britain, with a growing number by 5,000 every year, yet many are still treated with suspicion. EastEnders' Bobby Beale character has converted to Islam, and the faith is being presented as a positive influence in his life. This is overdue. Converts to Islam are one of the fastest growing religious communities in the UK, but they often make headlines for all the wrong reasons, whether it's Oxford-born Jack Lett's ISIS link, or a contentious tweet by newly converted singer-songwriter Sinead O'Connor. Muslim converts are generally met with an air of suspicion, or in many cases open hostility. So this is, again, clearly not done for an authentic storyline. It's done because, boom, the message, accept Muslim converts. As post-colonial pre-Brexit Britain wrestles with the existential questions of what it means to be British, we should look to learn from Muslim converts who have been able to straddle multiple identities that are often presented as conflicting. As someone embedded in grassroots Muslim communities, the person who writes this, I'm acutely aware that converts represent the future of Islam in Britain. Reads like a bit of a threat. That's why I am less concerned with the quantity of people coming to my religion than I am with the quality of both their faith and their journey to go through Muslim communities. Every one of these journeys is different, but none of them should end in ISIS-held Syria. Oh, I can agree with that last point, absolutely. But then let's look at how they express that journey, shall we? Far-right extremists Neil and Aaron plan to bomb the mosque in disturbing scenes. So the dad and brother of his sister, the dad and brother of his girlfriend, the Muslim convert, are planning to bomb a mosque and blame it. And try and... It's basically a plot of Four Lions, where Barry goes, bomb the mosque, radicalise the moderates. That was meant to be a parody. You weren't meant to take it seriously. Come on. But also, how often does that happen when the other way around, if we look at the proportion of terrorist attacks to religion, doesn't go quite in the narrative's favour, does it? So let's quickly jump to Coronation Street before we run out of time. Peter becomes a paranoid conspiracy theorist over Big Pharma. Peter Barlow was determined to get revenge on Mr. Thorne after discovering how poorly he behaved before, during and after his liver transplant in Coronation Street. The storyline was largely about the class system. For Peter, he was angry at a man like Thorne, privileged, rich and well-educated, and how he could use his higher status to get away with hideous crimes, and continue to look down on a man like Peter, a former alcoholic who works as a taxi driver. So you can see how they're saying, oh, it's acceptable because it's about class. It's about prejudice. It's about workers versus the greedy capitalists. So that's an acceptable narrative. But then Peter's life takes another turn next week as he meets Griff, Spider's mate, who has some very interesting views on big pharmaceutical conspiracies. Should we look at what one of their characters thinks about Big Pharma? Let's listen to first clip, shall we?
Yeah, I thought the Gazette would have made more of yesterday's protest.
Yeah, well, they report what they want to report.
Well, it was a pretty big deal.
Question is, who owns the media?
I don't know. Who does?
Well, that's the point. They don't want you to know. The media, banks, big business, they're all in it together, a secret global cabal.
And who exactly is this secret global cabal?
Who knows? Tell you one thing. Not like you and me. Here, keep your change.
Okay, so he not only gives her a tip, it's also ironic that the first few letters of Coronation Street spell Corona, as he's talking about the secret conspiracy of lockdowns. But we also do know who does this, and it's the likes of the World Economic Forum, the UN, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, these giant hedge funds that prop up wokeness and climate initiatives with lots and lots of money, more money than most countries have in their possession. And so it's not an evil conspiracy theory leveled at a particular ethnic group or minority. It's, hey, here are these weird institutions that are funding wokeness, and funnily enough, they seem to be funding these programs. But did you know, if you suggest that, like you and me might say, oh, the WEF are an unaccountable, unelected body, just as the EU, we couldn't elect them and they're having control over our lives. It's no different from Brexit to say they shouldn't be intervening. Do you know that you and me are anti-Semitic for saying that?
How's that?
Well, let's watch this clip, shall we?
He's a bit of a weird one, that Griff. So, do you think there's a secret cabal of powerful people who secretly run the world? Might be. Really? No. You know, I love a conspiracy theory as much as the next girl, but it can be dangerous. Dangerous how? Like the MMR vaccine causes autism. A lot of kids went unprotected. A lot of them got really ill. Do you know what? Some nights, when it's clear, I look up and I think, did we really land on the moon? You know, apparently it was a big thing back then, but we've not gone back, have we? Clearly it wasn't that great. Yeah, and Griff's secret cabal owning the media and banks is also a classic anti-Semitic trope. He didn't say it like that, though, did he? No, but it's not the best rabbit hole to go down. I don't trust him. Look, I'm worried that microchip they put in you with your COVID vaccine's malfunctioning.
You're £1 short.
One day, all money will be meaningless.
Really?
This coin only has meaning because we agree it has meaning. When in reality, it's no more valuable than a shiny button.
Are you going to give me a lecture?
No, want to give you £1?
Thank you.
I like Griff. He talks a lot of sense.
Fantastic ending. Okay.
It's funny, Coronation Street.
Again, it's they're not giving you a storyline. They're saying, don't think for yourself, don't question things. And also, Griff's kind of right about money, as you said, with fiat currency. It's been utterly debased. It has no gold standard anymore. The government are just printing it. How do you think we're in this position of inflation, folks? It's because they just printed money to death during the COVID pandemic to pay for the furlough scheme. And so, what's he wrong about? But no, we're just going to dismiss him as an anti-Semite, even though he never mentioned Jewish people whatsoever. Isn't that inconvenient? They're also persecuting their own stars for real-life conspiracy theories. They've complained about star Sean Ward having an outrageous conspiracy theory, and it's to do with Zelensky, and just saying, well, he doesn't really seem like he's on the up and up. It might seem like he got some money from some strange sources, like, I don't know, the Biden family, when Joe Biden literally admits to saying, oh, yeah, unless you fire the prosecutor looking into my son's business dealings, you won't get the $1 billion. Okay. Yeah, but conspiracy theory, as per usual. I don't know whether or not this guy is an upstanding guy, but he's allowed to think for himself. And then if you weren't convinced that the networks are actually joining forces to sell you a narrative...
I'm going to defend that Coronation Street clip. I thought it was all right. I thought it was quite balanced.
What, her just dismissing it as an anti-Semitic
Yeah, but that was
trope?
one character. And then you had another character that was going. I mean, that is the.
Yes, but they're setting up that character to be indoctrinated and make an example of. That's the thing.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know about that, but I.
Well, that's
I've
the
seen
character.
worse.
That's the character I mentioned before from the article saying it's Peter Barlow's falling down a conspiracy theory rabbit hole. The guy that said he makes a lot of sense. That's Peter.
Okay.
Yes, they're setting it up. So.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah, they're setting up to make him a fool as a shining example of why you shouldn't listen to these dangerous voices. Yeah, if you don't believe they aren't all coordinating to sell you a line, here's the next one. British soaps and continuing dramas join forces to highlight climate change. So they're all working together.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's
For the first time in British television history, the country's soaps and continuing dramas have joined forces to highlight the issue of climate change and the environmental issues, and this was on the eve of COP26. This was Casualty, Coronation Street, Doctors, EastEnders, Emmerdale, Holby City and Hollyoaks have all filmed scenes or have references to covering climate change and reference each other for the first time ever. This was on Monday the 1st of November in last year, and Jane Hudson, on behalf of Emmerdale and ITV Studios, said, "Never before have all 5 soaps and continuing dramas come together and united in telling one story. We certainly haven't seen characters pop up in other shows before. This is a real treat for our audience, whilst also allowing us to get across a very important message." That's what it's all about. It's to propagandise you. So, if you're a soap viewer and you're sick of this nonsense, go to Ofcom, make a complaint. It's the Government Regulation Board. Doesn't mean they'll necessarily do anything about it, but that's one of the only avenues you can have to make your voice heard. Or alternatively, you can sign up to our website and become a premium member for as little as £5 a month and see a narrative that is quintessentially British that hasn't been corrupted by the most terrible of messages. This was actually written by Terry Jones from Monty Python. It's Beau and I discussing life lessons from Labyrinth. And I decided to include this at the end of the segment because not only does my mum love soaps, this is her favourite film, so I did it in her honour. So, and I really can say this is my favourite bit of content we've done. So simply tune out if they're going to berate you and call you an anti-Semite. Watch things that don't talk down to you. And quite simply, you're not getting your message across in a very authentic way if rather than characters, you're just making them be political pawns. Quite boring, actually.
my ex-wife's favourite film.
Oh, good. Oh, well, I don't know if that's slightly bittersweet to say, but there you go.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as the live hangouts we do with premium members, this one on our Cyberpunk Dystopia Part 3. And if you want to find out what else we're putting out, you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.